Father Dr. Vincent Braganza, Chairman, Xavier Research Foundation, Ahmedabad, will now present his views.
I believe the last batsman has arrived. Sisters and brothers on the stage, sisters and brothers in the audience. I'd like to set the tone of this presentation of mine with a verse that a friend of mine sent some time ago. I am a stained glass window, little of light comes through, flecked by 1,000 colors, purple, mauve, and blue. But when you praised my colors, only the dear Lord knew how I longed to shatter the painted glass and show far worlds to you. I don't know whether Dr. Jayesh came across these lines before, but in inviting me to make this presentation today, he sent me this assignment. Share your wisdom and spirituality of Christianity for religious and interfaith harmony, but do this against the background of the session, the theme, reclaiming the heart of our humanity, working together for a world of compassion, peace, justice, and sustainability. As I stand here today before you, I am indeed acutely aware that we are in a gathering that is focused on religious and interfaith harmony. In this setting, my immediate recall takes me back to my childhood. I was born and raised in Mumbai, in a little corner of that great megacity, far away from its bustle and din, in an area called Kolaba Dandi. In front of our home, about 50 meters away, stood a mosque where Muslims from the surroundings gathered regularly for namaz. Down the road that went past the mosque, about 100 yards away, was a temple where Hindus of the area would stop to offer puja. A 5-minute walk away from home stood the Catholic Church of St. Joseph's, where my family and me would offer mass and prayers regularly, pretty much every day. I remember with relish partaking of the prasad shared with us by our Hindu friends and receiving sweets and crackers at Diwali. We delighted in the food that our Muslim neighbors shared with us at their festivals. And come Christmas, Mum would send my siblings and me with plates of good, delicious, homemade, traditional Goan Christmas sweets for our friends and neighbors to enjoy, Hindus, Muslims, and Christians alike. That is the past I come from, a time that I cherish with an innocent nostalgia. It is a path that preserves my comfort as I stand here before you, because it is a past that gives me hope. A past that lasted over 25 years. In those years, a fabric existed in which communities that professed different faiths, that were disparate in their ways of worship, were woven together into one seamless fabric. I have to admit, though, that those halcyon days are now history, and we suffer today a fate wherein conferences of this kind need to be organized to have religious dialogue with one another, so that not just we, but the world at large may be at peace. In the years that have followed, I have witnessed with disbelief and dismay and deep angst that fabric being torn asunder and burnt to ashes. But we cannot afford to lose heart. More than ever today, I believe, as the theme of this session suggests, we need reclaiming the heart of our humanity. And the key to doing that successfully is in the theme, working together for a world of compassion, of peace, of justice, and sustainability. It is the way ahead. However, there is a concern, a caution that I cannot help but voice at this juncture. The theme of this session must be hitched to a wagon of unaccountable action, or else it will remain a pious platitude and a hollow sounding gong. I want to express the hope that our deliberations today will lead to action. When I reflect and analyze the situation of that era and those days of my early childhood, I am inclined to believe that among many of the other factors that it is not relevant for me to go into right now, the wisdom and inspiration of my Catholic faith played its part. In my subconscious, through my growing years, the key theme of Christianity had woven itself: love thy neighbor. The words of the letter of St. John were there to belie my claims of any love for God. You cannot love God and then not love your neighbor. He puts it graphically. How can you claim to love God whom you do not see when you don't love your neighbor whom you see? So at the core of my sharing with you is this Christian understanding of love, of outreach to the neighbor. It is through such love that we can reclaim the heart of humanity. Love of neighbor needs to be restored to our hearts, irrespective of the color of the faith we profess. Crucial here is to identify who is my neighbor. The answer that has inspired me and that kindles Christianity was given by Jesus himself so poignantly in the parable of the Good Samaritan. According to the parable, if we read it with an open mind to derive wisdom and inspiration from it rather than religious teaching, the neighbor is the one who is in need of caring, who is left bereft of everything, one whose situation is helpless, the down and the out, the destitute, the poor. These are our neighbors. So let me turn now to share with you the wisdom of this inspiration and of my spiritual traditions in terms of a few questions. As I elucidate the answers to these questions, I hope you will bear with me if I resort to a few nature parables. As a Christian and a follower of Jesus who spoke to the multitudes in parables, I hope I can claim this privilege. So then, what has my Christian background contributed to ensuring justice in the world? Like many other religions, Christianity too offers its adherents ultimate salvation. The moot question is, how does a Christian achieve that salvation, this liberation from being caged in a physical body, this freedom after death? In addressing this question of how we are saved, I perceive that there has been an evolution of our Christian understanding. John Sobrino, a theologian whom I read recently in a book, The Eye of the Needle, sums it up well. The book swings through a pre-Vatican Council view in which the Church is the unique door to salvation and goes past the post-Vatican view in which the world is the only path to salvation, and arrives, what I accept today, the poor as the sine qua non for salvation. It is the poor that will save us. For all practical purposes, Sobrino therefore claims the poor merit their salvation, and further dares to say the poor are existentially essential for the salvation of the non-poor. The predilection for the poor is undeniably present in the Bible, and more specifically so in the life of Jesus. As my living of Christianity has matured, I have been challenged to make a preferential option for the poor. It is in this option that inspired me to build the Loyola Center for Research and Development in Ahmedabad, so that the fruits of our current day knowledge society, the fruits of research, the fruits of a science and technology world may be available to enable sustainable livelihood options to those on the margins of our society, so that they can emancipate themselves from poverty and economic deprivation. Justice in the world at the grassroots means catering to the poor and have-nots of society and eradicating poverty. In a world of unbalanced distribution of goods and wealth, in which a minority enjoys the largest share of the fruits of development, and by far the vast majority of mankind is relegated to making do with the crumbs of the table, justice does not exist. This is an unfair situation. We live in an unjust world, and the only way out is love for the poor, a preferential love for the poor, and thus a restoration of love to our hearts that have grown tepid. Left to themselves, the poor will encounter the justice that they have a right to. That justice, above all, is a right to a human existence, a right to roti, kapda, or makan. Their situation, as I perceive it, would be akin to what they say about the buzzard in this buzzard story. It is said, if you put a buzzard in a cage 6 feet by 8 feet with the top open, the bird, in spite of its ability to fly, will be an absolute prisoner. The reason is that a buzzard always begins a flight from the ground with a run of 10 to 12 feet. Without space to run, as is its habit, it will not even attempt to fly, but will remain a prisoner for life in a small jail with no top. We need to develop the sensitivity to give the space, the runaway that the poor need to take off from poverty to a life of justice and dignity. We have divested ourselves often of this responsibility to do anything by resorting analogically to the observation. But the cage is open at the top. Why don't they see it and hop out? If they really wanted to, they would. They are just happy to revel in their situation, doing nothing, perpetuating their captivity in poverty. My experience of living this option for the poor has been a remarkable one. I have discovered as principal of St. Xavier's College, Ahmedabad, that the choice for the poor by the college was cherished and valued by our staff, our students, our parents, our alumni, our well-wishers, by the entire Xavier Parivar. And what, may you ask, is the religious composition of this Parivar, this family? It comprised Catholics and Protestants, Jains and Buddhists, Muslims and Parsis, Hindus and Sikhs. Almost every faith persuasion was represented, including atheists. When it came to taking up the cause of a poor student or reaching out in service beyond our campus to support the poor, religious heads were forgotten. They fell by the wayside because the heart was touched and moved to compassion. No wonder then that the Social Service League, initiated as the brainchild of Brother Augustus Lobo at St. Xavier's Ahmedabad, was picked up as a model and today has followed as the National Service Scheme integrated into higher education network of the University Grants Commission. My second question: what is my take on sustainability in terms of my Christian faith and practice? The question of sustainability takes me down to ground zero. I interpret sustainability for our world in terms of the sordid state and dismal survival possibilities of our earth home. As one author summarized it, Elizabeth Johnson, the crisis we are facing is ecocide. If we are interested in tackling sustainability, this is where the crux lies. It has to do with the way we live and the values associated with that living. In terms of my own personal faith, my parents, as part of the understanding of their Catholic faith, brought us up with the values of not wasting. We were taught that gluttony and overeating was a sin. Flaunting and exaggerating material possessions ad nauseam were frowned down upon. Recycling was the culture in our family. When my elder brother outgrew his pants and shirts, and they were none the worse for the wear, I inherited them. And when I outgrew mine, it was my younger sibling's turn to look good in them. And I dare say he looked better than me in those. At least that is what we told him, so that he wouldn't make too much noise. Our openness to each other, our openness to the Tao, capable of knowing, loving, and entering into dialogue, remains the source of our nobility as human persons. As Pope Francis says, a correct relationship with the created world demands that we weaken not this social dimension of openness to others, much less the transcendent dimension of oneness to the Tao of God. Our relationship with the environment can never be isolated from our relationship with others and with God. Otherwise, it would be nothing more than romantic individualism dressed up in an ecological garb, looking us into a stifling immanence. Earlier, I narrated the buzzard story. I have another one. It is the bat story. The ordinary bat that flies around at night, a remarkably nimble creature in the air, cannot take off from a level place. If it is placed on the floor or on the ground, all it can do is shuffle about hopelessly and no doubt painfully until it reaches some slight elevation from which it can throw itself into the air. Then at once it takes off like a flash. Our blue earth, our planet home, is in a similar predicament. We need to push it so that it is able to find the space to be able to fly off and restore itself. As one theologian puts it, the external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. For this reason, the ecological crisis is also a summons to profound interior conversion. And that is where we need compassion, as inspired by Jesus, to bring this world to peace. The first step in the exercise of this compassion is to move towards hope, compassion for the poor and compassion for our earth home. As a Christian, to me, the example and inspiration of this compassion is Jesus. Elizabeth Johnson puts it across thus: the living memory of the Gospels, for example, depict Jesus preaching a non-violent ethic pervaded with compassion and mutual regard. He himself lives in tune with the natural world, knowing about growing seeds and harvest, clouds and sunsets, trees and weeds, sheep and mother hens. His disciples are instructed to learn lessons about their relationship to God from the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. At the end of the day, this compassion in Jesus propelled him to place all in and before his Abba, his Father. Jesus taught us to pray. He prayed constantly. Prayer was the protective mantle with which he covered all who were drawn into the ambit of his compassion. Among the most important things Jesus prayed for was peace for such as we. This brings me to my final story, a bee story. A bumblebee, if dropped into an open tumbler, will be there until it dies, unless it is taken out. It never sees the means to escape at the top, but persists in trying to find some way out through the sides near the bottom. It will seek a way out there where none exists until it completely destroys itself. If instead of looking down, it could look up, the bee would survive. If we are to escape from the mess we find ourselves in, if we want peace, then the wisdom that Jesus imparts is have compassion for each other and for our earth home. Pray for it and couple that to looking to God in prayer. Sorrow looks back, worry looks around, but faith looks up and energizes us to live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak kindly, and trust in our Creator who loves us. In summing up then, the poor and our ecology are two sides of the same coin. Our salvation depends on how we invest this coin. Our different religions, our varying faiths must push us and inspire us, but let us not use them to stop us and divide us in these endeavors that should unite us in interfaith harmony. For the poor and ecology transcend all religious labels. And if I were to take the liberty to extend John Sobrino's formula further, outside the poor and ecology in tandem, no salvation. Nobody is going to heaven. We are all headed for hell. In ending, let me take my cue from these three stories about the buzzard, the bat, and the bee. Therefore, this is my take-home message to you. It is about time that we keep up the buzz in a very urgent way about the poor and our earth home and how the fate of our salvation is tied up to what we make of their faith. Let's bat for those that live on the fringes of our society and for our crumbling ecology with a holy impatience. Then and then only, notwithstanding our religious tags, may we let ourselves be at peace, for only then we will have put the heart back into our humanity. God bless you.